Hello, love. I'm Aspen. I'm an embodiment coach, and last week I recorded a video of me having a breakdown. My brother grabbed the camera, and I basically walked myself through all of the things I do to support my system and my body from moving from a very contracted, stuck place to a more expansive place that has possibilities. And I received some questions on wanting to go deeper and how to do some of the things I did in that video. And so this is a breakdown of the breakdown, if you will. So to begin with, if I was to encapsulate everything in just one big blanket, my deepest practice and what I believe is really at the core of every single thing is I met myself where I was. And I held myself in compassion. So that encompasses a lot. So one of the first things I do when I'm in a dark place, when I can remember, and one of the first things I did in that video was to just meet myself in the isness, in what is. Oh, this sucks. Oh, this hurts. Oh, I just hate this. Whatever that isness is, to meet it. So a lot of the times the suffering we feel is from the resistance to the isness. There's a beautiful equation out there, pain times resistance equals suffering. And so meeting myself in the isness, right there, finding my feet and breathing. That is where I began, and that is where I return to when I so easily get pulled off as life is happening. So meet yourself where you are in the isness, breathe. And then some things I did to support my system in kind of calming, like rinsing my nervous system and calming so that I could even get to a place where I can tune into what's real. Because I don't know about you, you can feel this in your body, but when I'm in a contracted place or a stuck place or just in reaction, I'm not very in tune with reality. Like, I've got a lot of stories about how people are and how things should be and how I am, and there's a lot of narrative happening, and my lens that I'm looking through is very tinted. It's very narrow and very specific. And so oftentimes when we're in that place, it feels really sticky and hard to get out of. So some of the things I do to soften that held, stuck shape, basically, that our body and our face and our mind takes, is to create softness and suppleness in the body, because that creates softness and suppleness in the mind. So some of the things that I do are to orient myself to my space. So to look around, to take deep breaths, to start to become in contact with my senses. What can I see? What can I smell? What can I taste? What can I touch? So all of this is to bring me back into here and now. Not stuck in the past, not worried about the future, here, this moment. As I breathe, and as I soften my body. So one of the things I did in that video was I contracted and then I released. That in my body supports me in finding more suppleness, softness, and flow. Because when energy gets woken up, and I don't like it, I contract and I keep it down, right? I keep it together, put on that face, like, I don't want to feel this, and it kind of gets held and bound within me. And I won't even notice, especially my face, right? We've all felt that tension and constriction in our face, and that translates all the way down into your body. So to think about for you, would it be valuable for you to increase your capacity to be able to soften in those moments when you feel, or even if you don't even notice, that you're contracted? So the value for me is a tremendous amount of freaking energy, right? It takes a lot of energy to walk around the world like this. just constantly moving around like this, right? You can feel it if you do that with your hand. You can feel how much energy that takes and how much energy is released when you let go. So 1, that abundant amount of energy. 2, it supports in calming my system and coming back to the moment, to my body, to my feet, to what's real. So it gives me an opportunity to kind of connect back in with myself before I correct, before I choose what's next. So my next step is coming from a place of connection, of choice, and of a little bit more clarity. So I'm not just reacting and doing kind of this tumbling forward and domino effect that I think we can all feel, right? Like one thing goes wrong and then we just like, so orienting to my space, taking a deep breath, contracting and releasing. Then the next thing I do usually, and I did in that video, was some continuous movement. So after my body gets activated and then begins to soften, it naturally, a lot of the times, wants to move. The more in general we can let our bodies lead, I believe, the easier life is. So when we're at a disconnect and kind of fighting ourselves, it's not so great. So continuous movement, as in just letting the body move as you breathe. Continuous movement in the face, right? Because it starts to soften, once again, that suppleness in the mind. It starts to soften the stories. It starts to unmask this shape that our faces have taken around what we believe to be true and the meaning we're making in that moment. Which the meaning I was making in that video of why, where I began in that video was this intense feeling of failing. So if you've ever felt that feeling of failing, like, I'm failing, or that feeling of, well, I'm not failing yet, but right around the corner, yep, for sure, gonna happen. And so by continually moving the body and breathing and orienting to my space and coming back to my body, I was able to start to pull apart the grip that story had, the identification with it that I had kind of merged. So let's see, some of the next things that I did or that I always do are making sound. So that's another way to release energy, because all of this, if you kind of boil it down, is energy, right? Our thoughts are energy, the emotions are energy in motion. And so like letting out energy and sound through movement, through breath, and through sound. The next thing I did was to get outside. So we are animals and we forget that. And I feel that causes, at least in my body, suffering. So when I can go back outside and connect to, the sky, the earth, I put my bare feet in the earth, right? I connect back to the fact that I'm a wild animal on this planet and that I belong. Because one of the things that gets severed when I feel that I'm failing is my belonging. So loneliness, severed belonging. So for me to be able to start to make my way back to belonging, the thing that really supports is resourcing in nature. Feeling that connection to the elements, right? We are the pure, perfect blend of the elements, of earth, of water, of fire, of air. So to connect back to those more simple, sacred, ever-present things can really support. And then one of the last things I did in that video was to turn the camera around on my little brother who was filming. So to reach out for support and connection. And notice that was naturally the last thing that I did. Because sometimes when we're in that really contracted shape, especially if shame is kind of like the outer covering, it can really be hard to reach out. And so for you to think about those times where you've really been stuck and really needed someone, and it felt impossible to reach out. It felt impossible to send that text. It felt impossible to call. Sometimes we need a little bit of support and resourcing and undoing and softening before we can get to that place of, hey, I need you. I'm not doing so well. this sucks. You want to hang out? Right? Any of those like calls out to our people. And so to know that like incremental, that is, if I had to give one thing to support in shifting out of whatever it is, the funkiness, incremental. It's not all or nothing. It's not I'm sad or I'm happy, right? There is a whole mess of crap and a whole middle ground. So incrementally, what is the smallest doable step I can take in the direction that I desire? The smallest incremental doable step. For me, sometimes that is literally just hitting the shuffle on my playlist that I know, it gets me to start to breathe. It gets me to start to move. Oh, maybe I lay down on the ground and I start to do some cat-cows. I start to yawn. I start to look around, right? But if I knew I was going to do all of that, that might have been too much. But hitting play, that's pretty easy. So to be so incredibly kind and gentle with yourself. And the last thing I will say, which I said in that video, was sometimes it's not the time to just shift out. Sometimes we rush to get to feeling better. Sometimes we need to just feel that pain. That's where we begin, right? Meeting ourselves right there in the isness, holding ourselves with compassion, and just feeling. Sometimes we really rush that because it's uncomfortable, because we don't like it, because our little bodies, when we were little, learned that it was too much, because it was. And so now, as bigger beings, we get to learn what is our true capacity. And is it time to shift out of this grief or this sadness or this stuckness? Or do I need to just meet myself here and feel a little bit more? And to totally give permission for that. That is really important. It's not just like, oh, I never want to feel bad, so I'm using this as a way to not feel what I need to feel, right? That kind of spiritual bypassing that is so prevalent out there in so many different scenarios. And so to really feel into, how can I care for myself here? How can I hold myself in compassion? And if that feels too difficult, because sometimes the compassion feels out of reach, right? Especially if we're in the little shame cocoon, is to call on it from something else, right? To imagine warm light coming down, to imagine someone in your life that loves you, having the compassion come from them, having the earth bear you and hold you when it feels unbearable. So there's also other resources that can support you if you feel like I can't even have compassion towards myself right now. And letting that be okay, right? Letting the longing for love be the thing that fills you. Because when we're able to touch into those more kind of the deepest vulnerability, the deepest ouch, something can open from there. A softness can kind of sweep, and I call it grace, right? Grace just comes in and I can feel like this soft hand of grace. So there's a breakdown of a breakdown. And the last thing I'll say is there's a free offering, a 2-hour embodiment workshop on this Saturday, May 8th at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to be embodying the elements. So super, super, super juicy stuff. I also have several monthly memberships that are really powerful, a consistent container in which I facilitate in, so you have someone guiding you through movement, through sound, through embodiment practices. Also a guided meditation membership, and then tons of free downloadable resources on my website, like meditations, practices, all of the things. I also go live on Insight Timer and teach yoga classes and meditation, and yeah, there's like a bajillion things out there. So check all those out, and always feel free to comment. Let me know, like, what does this resonate with you? Like, what do you do when you're in breakdown? Where do you get stuck? Where do you get tripped up? And that supports me in creating valuable content for you, and also keeping this collective and community in cahoots and talking and feeling that shared belonging and shared just humanness, right? We're all in this together. And yeah, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I am sending you so much love in all of your beautiful breakdowns. Mwah.